Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? The Saints are indeed expected to hire Joe Woods as the new defensive coordinator. Here's Ian Rappaport on the NFL Network.
Dennis Allen, of course, running the defense. It is his show. Will continue to call plays, but did shake up the defensive staff a little bit. Now have one of the biggest answers for their questions going into the season. Joe Woods, the defensive coordinator the last several seasons for the Cleveland Browns, is expected to get hired in New Orleans as the DC, serving as a key role for Dennis Allen, mostly working with the secondary, but obviously being the coordinator. That should be finalized if all goes well, probably tomorrow.
So no great surprise there. We talked about Joe Woods last week when he interviewed for the gig. We talked on Friday about Todd Grantham joining the Saints staff, and we didn't know what role. It certainly would appear now that Grantham will handle the defensive line, which is where Ryan Nielsen was. And Joe Woods, being a guy who's predominantly a secondary guy, would likely handle that position group. And that's further underscored by this other bit of news today. Tom Pelissero reporting that the Saints and defensive assistant Corey Robinson are parting ways. This is really odd because Corey Robinson was in Mobile for the Senior Bowl this week. So the Saints sent Corey Robinson to Mobile for the Senior Bowl, and then it's like he gets back, and yeah, you're not going to work here anymore. This is just bizarre. And listen, I want to be clear. I'm not sitting here trying to tell you that I think Corey Robinson is this completely unincredible, like game-changing guy in the secondary who is just unreplaceable or irreplaceable. But Tom Pelissero noted Corey Robinson, who ran the DB room last season, he let his contract expire and is a free agent. So sort of his choice, I guess, not to come back, that he'll go elsewhere now. I keep looking at this, and there's parts of it that, this being the Saints offseason in total, that don't make sense. You finished this past season 5th in the NFL in total defense. Your defense was not your problem. And as we've noted during the second half of the season, really starting with the shutout of the Raiders, your defense was actually exceptional. You're one of the best scoring defenses in the NFL, starting with that Raiders shutout, 24-0. After that, you did allow 27 to the Ravens. You allowed 20 to the Steelers. You allowed 20 to the Rams. 13 against the Niners, 17 against the Bucs. Remember, that was a game where they had 3 points with like 3 minutes to go. 18 to Atlanta. You beat the Browns 17-10, so you allowed 10 to the Browns, 10 to the Eagles, 10 to the Panthers. So the last 3 games, you allowed 30 points total, 10 each week. Your defense was spectacular by the end of the season. Now, your run defense struggled, but scoring defense, total defense, you're very good. So I can understand Ryan Nielsen taking another job. He's going to go be the defensive coordinator in Atlanta. He's calling the shots. You don't want to bring back Chris Richard to give him the opportunity to go do the same, where he can go be a coordinator and call the shots? Okay. Corey Robinson, obviously, he don't want to be back. He let his contract expire. He's going to look where he can go get an opportunity elsewhere, which clearly he didn't see that in New Orleans. So you have all this turnover on your defensive staff, which was very good, and you're not doing a damn thing with the offense. They blew out Dan Rauscher, and I don't know if you saw this today, but Sean Payton is hiring Zach Strief to be his offensive line coach. So you remember the story with Strief. He played his whole career in New Orleans and then went and did radio for a couple of seasons, then jumped out of the radio booth onto the field as a Saints offensive line assistant. It's worth noting, Doug Marrone is the Saints offensive line coach, so you really don't lose anything here. Zach was an assistant on the offensive line, whereas Doug Marrone, who's been an NFL head coach, is your offensive line coach. So you could say Zach Strief has a lot of potential there. Maybe he does. Maybe he'll go be a great line coach. the Saints did bring Jari Evans on board last year as an offensive line assistant, in that training role. So maybe Jari Evans, Jari Evans was a coaching intern last summer, was how they phrased it. So now maybe Jari Evans fills that role that Zach Strief had. I don't know, but my point is, if you were hoping, looking at last season and saying this is not acceptable, and you were hoping for changes, the Saints maintaining the status quo isn't going to instill an awful lot of confidence. And I have no problem with the Saints hiring Joe Woods. Guy's been a DC in Cleveland. He's been a DC in Denver. Dennis Allen hired him back in 2014 when Allen was the coach of the Raiders. So there's a lot of things here that I'm perfectly fine with hiring Joe Woods. That's not a problem. And I'm good hiring Todd Grantham. I think you need your defensive line to improve. And maybe Todd Grantham, who had 11 years NFL experience as a defensive line coach before he jumped back into college with Florida and Mississippi State and Georgia, I think Grantham could certainly help there. But that's not where you need to improve. Yeah, sure, improve, but where you need changes, where you need to shake things up is on the offensive side. And I keep getting people asking me, what about bringing in someone like Joe Lombardi? I don't know what's going to happen with Joe Lombardi. Joe Lombardi got fired with the Chargers. He's had interest elsewhere. Maybe Sean Payton brings him to Denver like he just did with Zach Strief. That's an interesting sort of sub-layer to this whole offseason is how many Sean Payton assistants follow him to Denver to join his staff, either currently in New Orleans or former Saints assistants, which is then when I point back to Dennis Allen and say, you got to do you, man. You can't sit here and try to recreate what Sean Payton had, because you tried that this year and it didn't work. You tried to maintain the culture and the organization, the structure that had been put in place for a decade and a half, and it didn't work. You went 7-10 this year, and you weren't particularly close to being a championship caliber team. And if you think you're Derek Carr away from being a contender, it's just wrong. I just flatly disagree. There were way too many instances this year where you could look at the Saints team and say, yeah, they're not competitive. Blowing the game at Tampa was atrocious. The 2 pick sixes against the Cardinals. Terrible interception in the end zone by Andy Dalton. You could look at the game against the Ravens on Monday Night Football in your own building where you were not competitive in that game. There are way too many holes on this team to think that you're Derek Carr away from being right back in contention for a Super Bowl. And this season should have been an illustration of that. So maybe there are more changes to come, but unless you see them, maintaining the status quo for this team is tough to swallow. But what they're doing on the defensive side, I'm perfectly fine with. It's Dennis Allen is the guy who's the puppeteer. So if he's pulling the strings defensively, great. I'm good with that. He's proven he's a very good NFL defensive coordinator. But you need so much more than that for this team to get back into being competitive to a championship level. So the beat goes on, and we'll see if they do, in fact, make any offensive additions. We know they're not subtracting offensive staff, but are there additions to come that will help this team improve? But we wait to see. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.